transit trouble today here in New York that could ultimately affect millions of commuters. NBC's Lester Holt is in New York right now. Lester, so what's the very latest?
Natalie, the latest is there is a limited transit strike underway right now in New York. After all-night talks broke down, the transit union officials announced that they would begin the first in a series of strikes, initially targeting two private bus lines that operate from Queens into Manhattan. Those private lines recently absorbed by the MTA. Unclear how many people that will affect. We're told they are actually on strike as we speak. They will complete any run, drop people off their destination, then take the buses back to the barn. They're now setting apparently a Tuesday deadline. The strike could eventually spread to the mainline buses and subways. We'll keep watching. The union says it will go back to the table, Natalie.
The 2000s were an interesting time for the MTA. The early 2000s saw efforts to modernize the system by adding new technology trains like the R142 and R143. The late 2000s saw the MTA navigate through financial woes by discontinuing bus and subway services. However, the mid-2000s were an almost forgettable time except for the fact that there was a huge transit strike. Join me on this edition of the History of the MTA, where I look back on the 2005 New York City transit strike. The strike happened due to the expiration of a contract between the MTA and its workers. The contract expired on December 16, 2005, and negotiations on a new contract were to begin. The negotiations between the MTA and the Transport Workers Union failed and an agreement was not met. These negotiations were led by Roger Toussaint. Toussaint was the president of the Transport Workers Union, with his tenure lasting from January 2001 up until December 2009. The Transport Workers Union, or TWU, extending the deadline to December 20th, but no agreement was made by then. It was then when TWU decided that a strike would happen. Not everything went down at the same time. It started with a limited strike which saw Jamaica buses and Triboro coach go down, which saw 750 workers walk off their job. These private bus companies were chosen to be a part of the limited strike due to them not being covered under New York state law. The start of the full strike would be December 20, 2005, seeing everything go down. It would start at AM to allow trains to finish up their runs and move back to the yards. With the strike beginning, how would people get around? The strike eliminated all subway and bus service until an agreement was met. The city had to accommodate the increase of cars and foot traffic. Starting on weekdays from 5 o'clock AM to 11 o'clock MEST, Manhattanseth of 96th Street, as well as Olmsted and Elsand bridges, were subject to tow-off for restrictions. HOV 4 stated that vehicles must have at least for passengers. It also stated that commercial vehicles were not allowed. NYC began encouraging people to bike or walk to work, opening many bridges to foot traffic such as the Triborough Bridge, George Washington Bridge, and Manhattan Bridge. Many looked for alternative ways to get around. The New York water taxi began popular as it was a way to get around NYC and NJ. Taxis were allowed to take multiple fares, switching to a zone system as opposed to the existing metered fare system. Public school were also affected by this as they would start 2 hours later, with school buses follow the 2-hour delay. Universities provided shuttle service for students too. Some private bus companies were still running, like Command. Oddly enough, Fox News Channel began to run its own buses along several major routes. Metro North and Long Island Railroad did not stop during the strike. Passengers were only charged $4 for intracity travel, with Metro North providing a East Bronx shuttle. PATH began to run extra service between WTC and 33rd Street. All of the campaigns saw great increases to ridership during the strike. The strike began to wind down as on December 22, 2005, it was announced that a preliminary agreement between the MTA and TWU was reached. By midnight, bus and subway service began to start up. What the TWU got out of this was no change in the pension. 3. 4% and 3.5% annual salary increases for the next 3 years respectively, plus a 1.5% of salary cost to workers to help defray healthcare costs, got Martin Luther King, Jr. Dahlias a paid holiday, and won a refund of some prior employer compensation. After the strike, NY1 held a poll asking who should be blamed for the strike and if the TWU wants were fair. 41% said both TWU and the MTA were to blame for the strike. 27% put the blame on the MTA and 25% blamed TWU. 54% thought the union's wants were fair and 36% did not. What is interesting is that only 38% of whites thought the TWU wants were fair, while 3/4 of Latinos and African Americans thought the TWU wants were fair. That is 3 times as many white New Yorkers said the union is more to blame for the strike than did African American New Yorkers. 51% of New Yorkers said Mayor Bloomberg handled the strike poorly, while 45% thought he did good. Governor Pataki had 69% of New Yorkers say he handled the strike poorly, while only 23% said he did a good job. This has been the history of the MTA. Thank you for watching.